All right, so we're talking Chris Eubank Jr. today, right?
Yeah.
And like you guys listening already know, this is a guy with some serious boxing pedigree. But we want to go deeper than that. It's not just about the name, right?
Exactly. It's about understanding the man behind the gloves. What makes this fighter tick? What drives him?
Right, because he could have easily just coasted on his dad's legacy,
Yeah.
right? Chris Eubank Sr., a legend. But Jr., he seems determined to forge his own path.
And that journey, it's a fascinating one. I mean, just think about it. Born in Hove, goes to school in Brighton. Pretty standard upbringing so far.
Yeah, you'd think so.
But then, boom, teenage Chris is whisked off to Las Vegas. Not exactly your average family vacation.
Talk about a change of scenery. Vegas, huh? Bright lights, big city. What was the story there?
Well, the sources actually say it was a strategic move by the family. They wanted to get him dual citizenship, open up opportunities beyond the UK boxing scene.
Wow, even back then, huh? Ambition was clearly running high.
Absolutely. And there's this other little detail, kind of interesting. It mentions something called a paper adoption to help make the citizenship happen faster.
Paper adoption. Okay, now that's intriguing. Not entirely sure what that means, but it adds a whole other layer to things.
Right. Definitely raises some questions.
Sure.
But even with all that going on, we can't forget one crucial thing.
What's that?
This kid could fight. We're talking multiple Golden Gloves championships as an amateur.
No kidding. Those are some serious credentials.
Absolutely. And those wins were crucial.
Yeah.
Because it would have been easy, right? People would just dismiss him as, oh, he's just riding his dad's coattails.
For sure. Yeah. There's always that pressure, that skepticism when you're following in a legend's footsteps.
Exactly. But those Golden Gloves wins, they proved he could handle himself in the ring. It wasn't just hype.
So, amateur career check. He's got the talent. He's got the drive. But then comes the real test, right? Turning pro.
Yeah. And not just turning pro, we're talking 2011. He steps into the professional ring, and guess who's in his corner?
Let me guess.
Dad, you got it. His dad's old team. The same guys who helped build a legend are now tasked with guiding his son. Can you imagine that pressure cooker?
No, I can only imagine. The weight of those expectations, trying to live up to that name.
It's immense, but at least initially he seemed to thrive on it. Those first few years, they were electric. Knockout after knockout.
Came out swinging, huh?
He did. And it wasn't just about winning, it was about making a statement. He had that power, that aggression, that unmistakable Eubank swagger. Fans were hooked.
And the crowds loved it, right? Those early fights, you could feel the buzz. But then comes a real turning point, the Billy Joe Saunders fight.
Yes. 2014. This was a big one.
Big time. Multiple titles on the line, WBO eliminator. Winners basically got a shot at a world title guaranteed. The hype was real.
It was electric. And for Eubank Jr., this was a chance to really prove himself. I mean, Saunders was no pushover.
No, he was the undefeated British, Commonwealth, and European champion. But Eubank Jr., he had that momentum, that knockout streak.
He did. But Saunders, he was a different kind of challenge altogether. A crafty southpaw with slick movement and a tight defense. He wasn't going to be intimidated.
And it showed in the ring, right? Eubank Jr., he had his moments, landed some big shots. But Saunders, he managed to control the pace, frustrate Eubank Jr., make it a real tactical battle.
Exactly. This wasn't a brawl. This was a chess match. And in the end, it went the distance. Split decision. Saunders gets the win.
A tough loss for Eubank Jr. His first as a professional. You gotta wonder, did that loss light a fire under him? Make him even hungrier?
It certainly seems that way. Because what does he do? He bounces back with a win against Dmitry Shudanov, captures the interim WBA middleweight title.
Yeah, he didn't let that loss define him, did he? Showed real resilience.
He did. But then there's this interesting twist. He gets offered a rematch with Saunders.
A chance to avenge that loss. The money must have been tempting.
Oh, I'm sure it was. But he turns it down.
What? Why on earth would he do that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The sources don't really get into his reasoning, but you have to wonder if it was a strategic decision.
Like he felt he had more to prove, more to accomplish before a rematch.
Maybe. Or maybe it was about pride. Maybe he didn't want to give Saunders the satisfaction, whatever the reason. It was a bold move.
It certainly was. So, no rematch. Instead, he moves on, takes on Spike O'Sullivan, then Gary Spike O'Sullivan. 2 more wins for Eubank Jr.
2 more impressive wins, actually. He stopped both of them, showcasing his power and finishing instincts.
But it was the fight after those that really got people talking, right?
The Nick Blackwell fight? Yeah, that one was tough to watch.
Brutal. Eubank Jr. was dominant, no doubt. But Blackwell, he took a serious beating. Ended up in a coma after the fight.
It was a stark reminder of the risks these fighters take every time they step into the ring. and it clearly had a profound impact on Eubank Jr.
You could see it in his demeanor after the fight. The concern, the weight of what had happened.
It's one thing to win a fight, to have your hand raised in victory. It's another thing entirely to know that your opponent's health, their future, might be hanging in the balance.
Absolutely. And that fight seemed to mark a turning point in Eubank Jr.'s career. A shift in perspective, maybe.
Perhaps. It's hard to say for sure, but what we do know is that after the Blackwell fight, he makes a significant move. He decides to move up to super middleweight.
A whole new weight class, new challenges.
Yeah.
You gotta respect that. It would have been easy to stay at middleweight, rack up some more wins against familiar opponents.
It would have been the safer option, for sure. But Eubank Jr., he's never been one to shy away from a challenge. He wants to test himself against the best, even if it means taking risks.
And he jumps right into the deep end, doesn't he? First fight at super middleweight, he takes on Reynold Quinlan, the reigning IBO champion.
And it wasn't even close. Eubank Jr. completely dominated the fight, scoring a 10th round TKO victory.
Making a statement right out of the gate.
Absolutely. He proved he belonged in the division, and he did it in style.
But the real test was yet to come. Next up, Arthur Abraham.
Now, this was a step up in class. Abraham was a former multiple weight world champion.
A legend of the sport.
Yeah.
And a notoriously tough opponent, known for his durability, his granite chin.
Exactly. This wasn't just about power anymore. This was about proving he could hang with the best, the most experienced fighters in the world.
And how did he handle that pressure?
He rose to the occasion, outboxed Abraham, controlled the fight, and won a clear, unanimous decision.
It was a career-defining win, wouldn't you say?
Without a doubt. He silenced a lot of his critics that night, proved he was more than just a power puncher. He had the ring IQ, the technique to compete at the highest level.
He was the real deal.
And that win earned him a spot in one of the biggest boxing tournaments in the world, the World Boxing Super Series.
Now, this tournament, this was a whole different ballgame.
Absolutely. The World Boxing Super Series. It was basically the Champions League of boxing. 8 of the best super middleweights in the world. Winner takes all.
High stakes. And you know Eubank Jr., he thrives under pressure.
Oh, absolutely. And his first opponent, Avni Yildirim, a knockout artist. Tough dude.
Yeah, Yildirim had a reputation for being a brawler. But Eubank Jr., he was on another level that night.
It was a demolition. 3 knockdowns before the referee stopped it in the 3rd round. Just brutal efficiency.
Talk about making a statement. He sent a message to the rest of the tournament.
He did. Although there was that brawl, remember? Outside the ring.
Oh, yeah. Things got a little out of hand there for a minute.
It was crazy. Suddenly, everyone's attention was diverted from the actual fight. Punches flying everywhere, security struggling to contain it.
Just goes to show, boxing can be pretty unpredictable, both inside and outside the ring.
For sure. But back to the tournament. Eubank Jr.'s next opponent, George Groves.
Ah, the Battle of Britain.
Exactly. 2 British fighters, both with something to prove. The rivalry was real.
Years of trash talk leading up to this one.
And the fight itself, it lived up to the hype. Back and forth, both guys landing some heavy shots. But then, that head clash.
Nasty cut over Eubank Jr.'s eye. You could tell it was affecting him.
It was a bad one, but you know what? He fought through it, showed incredible heart.
He's never been one to back down from a challenge.
No, he's a warrior. But Groves, he used his experience, kept his composure, and edged out a close decision.
A tough loss for Eubank Jr., but he didn't let it derail his career.
Not at all. Groves got injured and couldn't continue in the tournament.
So Eubank Jr. gets a second chance? A replacement fight against J.J. McDonough.
Which he won convincingly. 3rd round TKO.
But it still felt like he had something to prove.
Oh, definitely. He wanted that world title shot. But first, he had some unfinished business to take care of.
James DeGale.
Yep, the long-awaited grudge match. 2 British fighters, both former world champions. The bad blood was real.
You could cut the tension with a knife during the weigh-in.
And the fight. Oh, it was a good one. Back and forth action. Both guys landing bombs. But Eubank Jr., he just wanted it more that night. Controlled the fight, scored a couple of knockdowns.
And walked away with the unanimous decision victory. It was a statement win.
It was. And after that, he decided to test the waters at middleweight again, fought Matt Korobov for the interim WBA title.
That one was over before it really began, though, right?
Yeah, Korobov injured his shoulder early on. Technical knockout for Eubank Jr., but not the way he wanted to win.
No, not ideal. But he didn't dwell on it. Back up to super middleweight to face Marcus Morrison.
And this is where we start to see a new side of Eubank Jr. He'd started working with Roy Jones Jr.
The legend himself.
And you could see the influence. Eubank Jr., he looked sharper, more technically sound, beat Morrison by unanimous decision, but it was the way he did it. Controlled, calculated.
He was evolving as a fighter.
Yeah.
And then came those back-to-back wins against Audigian and Williams.
Dominant performances, especially that Williams fight. 4 knockdowns. It was like he was sending a message to the rest of the division.
I'm still here, and I'm coming for those titles.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Chris Eubank Jr., the highs, the lows, the controversies. He's a fighter who's never been afraid to take risks, to challenge himself against the best.
He's a student of the game, constantly learning, constantly evolving.
And that's what makes his story so compelling, right? He's not just his father's son. He's his own man, carving his own path in the sport.
Oh.
And that journey, well, it's far from over. So for all you boxing fans out there, keep your eyes on Chris Eubank Jr., because you never know what he's going to do next.
That's the truth. He's one to watch, that's for sure.